Jordan Lunderville is a 21-year-old San Diego-based author, evangelist, and pastoral counselor, hoping to impact, educate, and provide holistic spiritual growth, resources for wholeness for those in crisis and confusion. I like that, Jordan. Jordan started out as a public school evangelist after feeling called to start an on-campus Bible study as a sophomore in high school. This eventually led him completing a certificate of campus ministry program with Urban Youth Collaborative, the leading campus evangelism organization in San Diego. Jordan also holds a board certification in pastoral counseling from Living Fluent Counseling. And nowadays, Jordan is serving the next generation through writing, speaking, coaching, and has a burning passion and vision to see young people find and follow Jesus. Yes, Jordan, that is awesome.
Thank you. That's like my very pretty self-biography right there. I made it sound stuff, but I'm not all that interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you are interesting, and I think that, what you're doing, all the things that I've seen you do online and things, are absolutely amazing. And I'm really happy that, that there are people out there that are wanting to mentor young people, young or old or whoever, because I think we need more of that. But I want to know a little bit. Let's start from like kind of like the beginning. Like where did all this come from? Like, are your parents Christians, or like, do they go to church or anything? How did you come about knowing Christ and then going into doing something on campus?
Yeah, thanks for that, and thanks again for having me on here. It's great to be here. So I do come from a family of ministry, different ministers, like for uncles and grandparents, and my parents. My dad had a church at one point too, and just like a massive brain for theology and all things scripture. And so I think I had the typical case of a kid who grows up in a Christian or in a minister's home and doesn't really have the true revelation personally. And so I had all of the head knowledge of, I had all the books of the Bible memorized and I knew, the Ten Commandments, but I didn't have personal revelation because I hadn't encountered Jesus for myself. And so I had actually kind of grown to resent Christianity because, um, like, we had a unique situation growing up because my dad was like hired to teach theology at a church very close to our home, but we had a home church that was separate from that church. And so I would my Sundays, as a probably, I think I was probably like 8 to 15 or so, was, getting up early, heading to our church service of our home church, and then immediately after that, heading to my dad's class, which was a 2-hour theology class, which was well beyond my depth. And so it's just like very confusing to me. It didn't make a lot of sense. And it wasn't until I was a bad kid. Like I got pretty much kicked out of middle school. Like my parents had to take me out, and I was just like very mischievous, and I was experimenting. There's nothing wrong with that. And so my parents sent me to Wisconsin, which is where my grandpa lives. My dad's dad lives in Wisconsin, and that was sort of
Interesting.
their
Yeah.
yeah, it was going to be their way to set me straight, because my grandpa's very disciplinary, very old school. And at the time he had a church out there. And
Yeah.
so, he would preach and, we would do our devotionals every morning, like very devoted, family and man of God. And something about being over there, probably being, away from my friends and from all the technology, I just like encountered God for myself.
Yeah.
And I got saved that summer, like I think it was July 17th, 2017 was the day I really like surrendered my life to Christ and had that personal revelation that I was so hungry for as a kid and never seemed to be able to find or maybe even want.
Mhm.
And so that's sort of the view from 30,000 feet of my story. And now I live to do the same thing for my 14-year-old self that I did, or that someone did for me when I got saved. So that's what's led me up to what I'm doing now.
Wow. That's an interesting story. That's a
Mhm.
lot. How did you feel when you went to Wisconsin? Was it culture change?
Oh wow, well it's evidently it's very different. I was born in Los Angeles and I've lived in San Diego for probably 18, 19 years now. And so going over there at 14 was like a 180 from anything I'd ever been around. And I was warned about how different it is, but
Yeah.
and also considering the generational difference between my grandfather and I, nothing could have prepared me for that. And funnily enough, I go to Wisconsin pretty much every summer now as sort of tradition. And so what's cool now is like I went this last June and got to preach at my grandfather's church and share
Wow.
about my book there, share about my ministry there. And
Yeah.
so God's kind of like given our family some full circle moments by allowing me to do that with my grandfather. So that was like a huge reward and honor to do that. So I love the guy. I love both of my grandma, my grandpa, and all of our family out there are incredible people. And I miss them every time I'm not there. So
Wow. That's so interesting. That is very, very interesting. So you had a lot of culture change, I'm sure, and that helps. Like that is what I did with my children. We moved from San Diego, where I'm born and raised, and they were born and raised here in San Diego, but we moved to England.
oh wow.
And yeah, and senior pastors of a church, the kids grew up there, went to school there. We have lifelong friends there and have two daughters that still live there. But they when they come back to America, like anywhere in America, but mostly San Diego, they have a hard time kind of having a good conversation because their ability to conversate is massive, right?
Oh,
And
interesting.
so they're talking about worldviews, they're talking about, things, the Queen or whatever, things, cultural things in England. And in San Diego, people are talking about, what is immediately in San Diego.
Yeah.
I don't know if you felt that as well, going like, you know, having that kind of little, but I think that it's good to have that diversity.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I've encountered is, and just in my experience, is I think there's a hunger in my generation for something a more philosophical approach. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the online influencer named Andrew Tate, but
Mhm.
last year he was, I think, the number three most Googled person in the world, and he's sort of become like a online Gen Z male masculine guru. And if you were to look at the political sphere, not for me to endorse political side here, but there's a hunger in my generation, especially among men, for a more clear, a more inspiring, and just an approach that's going to be more authentic to the needs of our generation.
Mhm.
And so I think there's a deep need across the board, in Gen Z specifically, for leaders to rise up who are going to say it like it is. There's sort of like this return culturally and in the church, I think, as well,
Mhm.
to let's have honest conversations. Let's not find workarounds and like create safe spaces for people. I think my generation is prioritizing honesty over comfort.
I agree.
And
I agree. Yeah.
we are very much in search of the truth, even if it's not the objective truth. We want to find a truth that fits, a truth that we can hold to and have values for. And
Mm,
that's where I think the church and like people like myself and other Christian leaders have the opportunity to meet the moment right now, is to meet people in that space and say, hey, you don't have to go look up to Andrew Tate, who uses questionable methods to make money and get famous. Like, where are the points that we can meet the next generation in the church with biblical values and principles so that they feel connected to our church in a very, very meaningful way. And last thing I'd say about that is I can speak for young men and say that a lot of young men that I talk to and am around don't have a space to meaningfully connect in the church, because
wow.
a lot of churches have become very much so seeker sensitive and not missional. And
Mm,
so maybe you've observed this, but I think the approach for so long was, let's just get as many people in as possible.
mm,
We'll soften our theology a little bit. We'll create a cool banner. We'll give them a free coffee for the first time and create this very padded, soft experience.
mm.
And again, in our generation, we're not really looking for that. I think we would rather be told the truth, even if it's inconvenient. And so, what I encourage people with is, especially young men, is find a church, a ministry, a place where you can meaningfully plug in and your purpose is actually met, like with
Mhm.
encouragement and enthusiasm. You're encouraged to go and spread the gospel or pursue your career or get married, like whatever that goal is, we should be with it and not against it.
Wow, that's very interesting. That is, yeah, and I'm glad you put that out there because when I came back from living in England, and visited several different churches and stuff, which I absolutely love the churches, all of them that I visited. But you can see kind of that um, a little bit, Um, uh, but I don't want to say too much about that because I love those churches.
Of
But
course, yeah,
yeah, I can see a little bit of that in there, and there were other churches that I visited. They were even more so, in that direction. But I'm real like that old school Pentecostal kind of,
yeah,
you say it like it is kind of thing. And but even me, I have to like kind of like be careful and kind of uh be up to par with what culture is saying,
yeah,
and have the wording correct and things like that. Because of that age difference, we spoke way differently, when I was your age.
mm, interesting.
Yeah. So it is a kind of a learning process, and that's why I'm always, that's why I'm online at my age. That's why I'm, doing the things that I do. I want to learn. I want to, progress. I want to know what's in the now. I want to know, um, what are people saying? What are the youth believing? Well, my kids are all grown now, but I have grandkids. They're growing up. What are they going to be into and things? My grandson is on YouTube already.
Yeah. Wow,
Very
how old is he?
artistic. He's only 7,
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. Very tough.
but
Yeah.
he creates like a stick figure movie is what he does.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's interesting, but yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. I think we want to, I mean, I want to, and I know that there are others like me that want to understand. What would you
Mhm.
say would be the most important thing for us to do, maybe at my age? I don't want to say my age, but I keep saying my age, but I'm not gonna say it right here. Um, but what would you say would be the most important thing for us to do in trying to understand?
Yeah, I had sort of a mini debate, if you want to call it. I tend to be on the more like let's figure out our issues and not avoid them side. Um, so I don't mind confrontation or hard conversations. And I was having a hard conversation with my grandfather and my uncle on my dad's side when I was over there because they have some probably more than anything cultural differences, and those seep into the church cultural differences as
Yeah.
well. And
Hmm.
so, if a kid who's 15 years old shows up to their church wearing a hat, they will be pulled aside and lectured for that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there's just different things in not only Midwestern culture, but just in the church culture over there that are sort of no-nos, and you're sort of expected to just know. And and so one of the conversations I was having with them was surrounding the LGBT issue. And the problem is we have preached hellfire and brimstone for so long that
Yeah.
not only does the world know our approach, but they don't want to hear our approach anymore as far as it's that approach.
Mhm.
And so what I challenged my uncle with, respectfully, I challenged him with just to think about was, is there a reason the young people are not knocking down the doors of the church to get in and sit in our service right now?
Yeah.
And maybe it has to do with that exact approach, where we have taken a ultra authoritative, hammer-fisted approach, which basically is my way or the highway approach. And while our truth is correct, while our biblical worldview is correct, the way we've gone about trying to adhere people to that is incorrect.
Yeah.
And so people will pastors catch heat all the time for trying to have conversations around this topic. But I think my ultimate consensus is what our generation is looking for more than anything is an approach that is truthful yet also open to debate and comprehension. And so I don't know if you're familiar, like with Charlie Kirk, for example, who shows up on college campuses and has debate with people about
Mhm.
religious and political issues. I think the reason that's so effective of a model in our generation is we don't want to be told this is what it is and either believe it or get out of the way. I
Right.
think we want our ideas to actually be challenged. We want to be able to come up against something, but also in a way that doesn't feel disrespectful or dishonoring towards us. Because when the model has always been, especially if a parent to a child and say, this is how we do it in our house, well, the kid's not going to end up doing that. They're probably going to end up doing the opposite of that as soon as they leave the house.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to encourage as many people as possible. Let's have real, healthy debate and conversation about the issues of our time and
Yeah.
about the Bible. So if I meet a kid who's 16 on a campus, I'm not going to attempt to convert him on the first conversation. What I will do is have a conversation, though, about what has led. So I work with kids on campuses who hold homosexual views or adhere to that sort of, sexuality.
Mhm.
And before I say anything about what I believe, I ask, what has led to you to hold that view?
Mhm.
Usually buried down in there is either a faulty worldview or even a religious trauma or a trauma from the home.
Right.
We've identified the hurt. And instead of trying to cut off, I like to say, instead of trying to cut people's fruit off, we need to cut the root off. So, what's that unhealed trauma, that unhealed root in you that's causing this behavior? And if we can
Yeah.
heal that, not only will we stop attacking people for what they feel and think about themselves, but
Right.
we'll actually get work done and helping them come to a biblical understanding of themselves.
Yeah. I like that, Jordan. I really like that. That was well said. Yeah. I see. I'm not that. I'm that old school Pentecostal. But when I came into the church, I was coming from, my parents were old hippies. They were from the
Mm,
biker scene, and you know, my mom was she's part Native American. My dad's, the white Irish guy, bearded, it was crazy growing up. And but within the biker community, there are people that are homosexual. Like, there are ladies who are not, they act like men.
Mhm.
And so I was around that. I wasn't affected by it, but I wasn't uncomfortable. I was like, when I came into church, I was like, I want to bring my friend to church. Do you know what I mean? But then it became this craziness where um, people were afraid of this type of person. I could bring the biker person, but if it was the person who was in the homosexual community, then it changed. So it was like that, but and it was hard to navigate. It was hard to navigate that.
Yeah.
And a lot of damage and hurt was caused back in those days, I think. And I think that, I know that there's a lot of church leaders that are my age that we want you to tell us. We want to also understand. We want to know, what you're feeling, how, because you're in the culture. You go to school and you're dealing with this. You're young and you're dealing with this stuff. I feel like it's more like people come to you no matter where they come from. If they're really like non-Christian, they want to shock you first. Like I've sat in like where the kids are into ska music and stuff, right? I've got uh relatives, nieces and nephews and stuff all over Barrio Logan that live down there, and a lot of times they have these massive parties where there's a bunch of
Mm.
ska punk kids. They had a band back there, and I went back there, to see what was going on and stuff, and got to know a lot of the kids, sat with them, had conversations, and I think the first thing they wanted to do was kind of like shock me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then, once we got past that, it was more of like, you know, uh, and it wasn't just in one setting. It was a couple of different parties that they had, and the the conversations led to, what do they believe? Where do they see their future going? And
Yeah.
so, they really opened up. They really opened up, and a lot of those kids they accepted Jesus. They might have not yet, but they accepted Jesus. And quite a few of them actually died. One died in a motorcycle accident,
Wow.
another, overdosed. It was, just a lot of different situations. Um, but it was, I think the biggest thing that hit me was getting past them wanting to shock me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I heard it recently that the most common person that a child is actually their or the parent that they're most comfortable with. And it seems paradoxical that a child would attack the person taking care of them the most. And so for most young kids, it's their mother that they feel the most safe to be verbally or physically aggressive with. And I think that trait of human nature actually translates to churches and church leaders as well. And so sometimes the hardest attack and the hardest rebuttal is coming from people who are trying to see if we're safe with their extreme emotions. And
That's
so,
a good point. I really like that point.
yeah, so, the role of a parent early in the life of a child is to regulate their emotions. And so when I was growing up, my parents served as lids to say, this is not a point that we go past as a family. And
Hmm.
so if I decided I wanted to live a certain lifestyle that was out of alignment, I wasn't going to be able to do that as long as that box of safety was there.
Hmm.
And now that I've translated more into the church sphere and I'm working with younger kids, they will throw these sort of jabs in to see how much I am willing to stomach.
Yeah.
because they want to know if I'm real or not. And you don't know if it's real until it's been tested. And so it's similar to, like, if you're going on a first date with someone, you're trying to test their limit. You're trying to see if there's somebody that you want to keep seeing. And so you'll
Mm-hmm.
throw something out there, or you'll share a little bit, or go vulnerable and see the response. And
Mm-hmm.
I saw this, I mean, like you had mentioned in my biography, I opened a Bible club. I was a sophomore in high school doing Bible studies with my peers, and the club grew to
Yeah.
be about 100 kids my senior year of high school. And I would constantly, because I became the Bible club kid at school, because there was a tenth of the school would go to the club. It was the
Yeah.
largest club on the campus, and so
Wow.
inevitably I had classes with people who knew the work I was doing, and or people that would actually attend the club. And I would get these, like, I would get these questions and things from, like, out of nowhere about, well, like, Jordan, you're like the Bible guy, so what does the Bible say, about having sex before marriage? Or what does the Bible say about, this and that? And I realized this was not an attack, it was an opportunity. And a lot of leaders see opportunities as attacks, and instead of answering the question, we become defensive out of fear. And I had to learn to be ready for any and every question. And oftentimes, these people were so hungry for truth that they were willing to test me in this way in order to see the kind of response. And like any good parent would do, I created a safe space for people to ask questions. And so there would be days during my Bible club meeting where I would say, everyone, there's no message today. I just want you to ask questions. We're going to break off into groups of 8, because I had a team of leaders who would help me. And so I just want you to ask questions. There's no right or wrong question, and there's no right or
Yeah.
wrong way to ask the question. And
Yeah.
so you were, mentioning, man, like, people love to test our beliefs and our worldview. I think to see if we're safe, number one, and to also see if we're legitimate people to share with and get advice from.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I like that. Yeah. So good. So tell me a little bit about how you got into writing. You have two books? Is that what it is?
Yeah, 2 books.
Wow. And you're so young.
Yeah, I wrote them both this year, so it's not like, I've been writing my whole life. It was, the way that happened was, last year, I did about 30 speaking engagements, and that
Uh-huh.
was youth groups, that was Sunday services. I spoke at a dance event one time spontaneously, like, across the board. I was speaking at all these places, all these people. And at the end of 2023, I had to ask myself, who actually remembers what I said? Out of all of those thousands of people that I spoke to, who is
Mm,
still sitting down on Tuesday night reimagining my sermon points from last August? And the reality is that number is very low, because I don't remember the sermon I heard 3 months ago unless it was
mm,
so life changing and impactful that it marked me for life. I'm not going to remember that message.
mm,
But because the message of the gospel is so important and so valuable, I started thinking of what's a way that I can come up with a platform and a medium to share with people that they're not going to forget in a day. And that birthed the idea of my first book. And so my first book, and I would say my most recent book that I just released, is really a long, long sermon. And so it's every time I go into the writing process, I ask myself, if I was standing before 100 students right now, what do I need them to know? And that's always the foundation from which I write and format all of my books. And so I love writing. It's always been a thought of mine to write a book, and 2023 was the year I decided that I would remove my excuses and just go for it. And so it hasn't been perfect. I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, but
mhm.
God's reaching people through those platforms, and it's an honor to be able to do that for people.
Wow, that's amazing. I just cannot even, wow, that's great. Um, Sometimes in life, we go through things, things happen, we have disappointments and things like that. But here's a question that I wanted to ask you. And now that you have you have a platform, you speak, you have a ministry. What would you have liked to have been done or said in your journey throughout life?
You mean like what would I have done differently, or what would I have maybe changed? Is that the
Yeah,
question?
what would you have liked others to have done in your journey,
Oh, I see.
going through life and stuff? What would you have liked to see?
Yeah, I think. Oh, that's a great question. I would, if I could do it all different, and if I could have seen more out of different people or different things on this journey, I would have liked to have seen more more of an open approach to discipleship. And I'll explain what that means. So I kind of had this crisis where everybody everybody wanted me to be a youth pastor. That was the goal. That was the pinnacle. If I was a 20-something-year-old Christian leader, I was going to be a youth pastor at a church. And what I started to run into was that every time I would try to shrink my calling to that box, I would always feel uncomfortable and frustrated and limited in my ability to reach people.
Mm-hmm.
And because some of the people in my life that had mentored me up to that point,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, had the foresight to see the impact of digital ministry and of evangelistic ministry in this day and
Mm-hmm.
age that we're living in. And so I applaud and appreciate their support of me, and they were doing and pointing me to the best direction that they knew.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would have liked to have really embraced earlier on was my individual unique calling, the way God made it for Jordan to do, not for the cool youth pastor down the street, not for, my best buddy in ministry. Like, I wish I would have embraced exactly what I'm doing earlier, because I think I lived years of my early and my starting years just in constant, like, oh, well,
Mm-hmm.
what are they doing? What's the right thing for me to do at this age? And
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't asking the question, what is God asking Jordan to do right now? And so
Mm-hmm.
no time with God is wasted, but I do think that I spent unnecessary time, like, running up against a brick wall that wasn't going anywhere. And sometimes we call it faith. It's like God's going to knock this wall down. And so we keep running into it and bashing our head up, right? And
Yeah,
God's actually put a door directly next to that wall, and He's trying to get us to see the door. But
yeah,
we're so narrowed in on what we want that we
yeah,
end up like getting a concussion and having to go to bed rest and
yeah,
delaying what we're supposed to do, which is walk through that door that has our name written on it. And on the
yeah,
other side of that door for me has just been nothing but blessing and promotion, because this is the path God has me on. And I wouldn't be blessed if I was trying to live someone else's calling. And so that's what I encourage people now through the JLM coaching program. I coach kids 12 through 18. And one of my biggest encouragements is, if God made you a square peg, stop trying to fit in a round hole. You are uniquely designed, equipped, called, and purposed for this time
mm-hmm.
and place to be who you are called to be, not who someone else told you you're supposed to be. And so I don't, I like to say this, and this sounds really cool, but I think it's true. I stopped trying to fit molds and I started creating molds. So I stopped trying to fit what I think was going to work for me, and I started
Mm-hmm.
creating a life and a ministry that was going to best serve my life and the needs of people around me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You already answered my second question. How would
Oh,
you have
cool.
done
I mean,
things differently?
about it.
And you shared that
Yeah,
already,
okay.
how you would do things differently. And then,
Yeah.
the other question was, what is it that Jordan wants to accomplish? What is it that
Uh,
Jordan wants to accomplish?
I think if I can model to my generation that living a fulfilled Christian life is possible, I don't even think another book or another sermon or any of those other things is going to add to the lasting legacy and impact that I want to leave. I think if I can model to people that it's possible to be successful. I have a mentor. I'll say this. I have a mentor who sat me down one day and he said, "Jordan, you've been so focused on being a priest that you haven't embraced what it means to be a king." He said, "God has called all of us to be priests and kings, or priests and queens. And the idea is that I would thrive both in the marketplace, in the
Mm,
world, and in my calling as a minister. And that those two things don't have to be exclusive to one another." And so you and I are both very well familiar with the broke pastor complex.
mm,
Pastors believe that they are just supposed to suffer and be poor for the sake of the kingdom and not ever
mhm,
supposed to flourish and thrive and have influence in this world. And we don't live in a generation where there's actual kings, but we
mhm.
do live in a generation where God's given influence to leaders. And that
Yeah.
influence is not just for the kingdom to come, although that's important. That influence spans to this age that God has put us in here on earth in our 80 years that we have here. And
Mhm.
so my life, I feel, will be most fulfilled and I will leave a lasting legacy if I can show and model to people what it means to be a king and a priest. And so I don't live this life on earth with my head down. Like Jesus said, the prayer, the Lord's prayer is, "Let it be on earth as it is in heaven." So that dominion that's waiting for us in heaven can also exist here now on earth. So I can manifest the miraculous power of the kingdom here on earth.
Yeah.
The kingdom of heaven, the street, our I like to say our jewelry is God's pavement. The things we save up for years, the gold chain we wear on our neck, that's God's pavement. His streets are lined with that stuff. And I
Yeah.
actually think it's God's desire that believers and leaders would actually begin to manifest the kingdom here on earth. So, what good is it if I am going to heaven, but I live like hell right now? So, I truly believe my life's mission, my impact, my mark, so to speak, is going to be that I lived a life that even an unbeliever can look at and say, that person lived a worthy, fulfilling life, accomplished big things, and did something and made an impact on the years that I had here.
That is very good. That is very good. So Jordan, in kind of um, winding down and starting to end our chat, what is one thing or two things that you want to say to anyone listening out there that maybe is questioning, maybe going through it? Um, what would you want to leave them with? What do you want to say?
Yeah, I had this revelation a while ago in sort of just like a season of suffering that I was going through personally, um, where essentially what I had learned about God up to that point wasn't translating to my experience. So I wasn't able to use all the scripture and theology I had learned to actually help me in my life. And to somebody who's questioning, the first thing I would say is there is no question that is outside of validity and reason to the Lord. Like whatever question you might have about why God's put you in the season you're in or the struggle you're going through, God's intentionally allowed, not maybe caused, but allowed for that to happen for a specific reason that doesn't always make sense in the moment. And so my own journey with grief has led me to realize and value that the things that I once thought were so important were not that important. And
Yeah.
it strengthened my relationship with God when I went through seasons of loss. And so people like to talk about the book of Job all the time. And I think the whole premise of the book of Job is not that, Job got restored at the very end of everything. God had to allow everything to be taken away, his family, his livestock, his home, all of these things, his personal health.
Mm.
And I think the real restoration of the story of Job is not the material, but it's the spiritual. And it's that God sometimes allows us to be in seasons of grief and loss because he's trying to restore spiritual strength onto us. And sometimes it's only in the lack of physical blessing that we get to that point of willingness and surrender. And so my encouragement to somebody who's in a crisis of faith, or you're on the edge, or maybe you're looking for a way out of everything or of life, man,
Yeah,
God has not forgotten or abandoned his child. And he
mm,
loves you just as much as he did when you were in that good season. And
yeah,
a bad or negative season is not a punishment for bad behavior. It's actually something that he's allowed into our life to strengthen us and help us to be more like Jesus in the long run. And so my encouragement is the encouragement of Paul is to suffer well. Suffer well means I'm going to suffer with purpose in mind. This is making me more like Christ. This is building up my heavenly reward. This is making me stronger than I was. That would be my encouragement to someone dealing with grief or loss or pain or misunderstanding.
I accept that. That's great. Thank you so much. Jordan, thank you for being here on the Heart of the City, San Diego, and the Glory Madrona podcast.
Oh
And
man,
Jordan,
thank you.
go ahead, say that again.
I just said thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on here, and I, like you had mentioned, I had just bumped into you online one day, and here we are. So really excited that I got to do this.
Yeah, I'm great. I'm very happy about that, and I want to send you some. I want to send you a message after we get off because give you some information about someone that I know who's going to be in town from England. And they are kind of similar to what you want to go into. And you might know them, but you might be interested in attending this event. So I'll send you over that information. You guys, all of you who are listening, you can find all the information about Jordan by following Jordan. But I also put in all of his information on the YouTube description. So you can go there and find his information, his phone number, and everything there. So Jordan, thanks again, and I'll see you on the other side.
Sounds good. It was nice. I'm glad everyone got to be on here. If you got the chance to join, thank you for watching, and thank you, Gloria, for having me. It was a huge honor, and I'm excited to hear all the stories about how this helped someone today.
Amen. Thank you so much. Bye, guys. See you later.